I'm Gretchen Hirsch, and welcome back to Gertie's Sewing Show, where we provide non-stop excitement for the sewing nerd. And today we have a very exciting episode. We're talking about the Charles James exhibit at the Met. And I have guests today, which I'm very excited about, two of my favorite ladies. To my left here is Allison, and she owns a shop here in Beacon where she does custom dressmaking and alterations. And then we have Fleur over there on the end, who has been helping me out for a few years. She is, can I say you're a pattern making expert? Yeah. She's an expert.
Go on.
And, and has been a big help to me behind the scenes on a lot of projects that you've seen. So thank you for being here today, ladies.
You're welcome.
I feel like we're on Good Morning America or something.
Of course.
So the Charles James exhibit. I have been a huge fan of Charles James for many years now. So when I heard that they were doing the exhibit at the Met, I was thrilled. And it really, I mean, to me, it lived up to the hype. So let's talk about how it was, the exhibit was structured, because it was in two parts, which was a little weird.
In two parts. I almost missed the big part. I almost walked out.
So yeah, if you're going, know that there are two different floors of the museum that you have to go to, or you might miss an entire half of the exhibit. So Fleur and I went together with Fleur's mom, and we ended up going to there's one part that is really just the gowns, and I would say that's like the most spectacular part of the exhibit.
It's the showstopper.
Yes. Yeah. So the gowns on sort of freestanding pedestals with like videos underneath, and there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of technology involved. We'll get into that a little bit later. And then the second exhibit is more... It seemed a little less carefully put together. There was a lot of stuff crammed into one small room.
Wear,
yes.
As well as like more small-sized ball gowns, so they weren't so lavish and extravagant. I think they were more maybe a cocktail evening gown rather than a ball gown.
And the other thing that was like an entire room of his personal effects, which were like a lot of bitchy notes that he wrote and stuff like that. Did you notice that?
I did notice that.
There was one that said like, I want you to always have paper clips. It's not too much, or it was like pencils or something. But it was a note to his assistant, like reaming him out for not providing pencils when he had asked them. So it was like on display at the Met. So, I mean, I personally think the highlight of the exhibit was the gowns.
I'd agree with that. I loved seeing, I think also the way that they presented it was just quite stunning and a different experience to how you usually see any kind of exhibition in museums.
Yeah, and you mentioned liking seeing the entire, you could walk around each gown.
Yeah. You could see, because they were on those circular pedestals, you had a full 360-degree view of the gown. And I think that's really important, especially for someone who loves sewing. You want to be able to see all the details, the back, the sides, every angle you can get.
Right.
So that was great.
I only would have been happier if they let us like look inside the dress, you know what I mean? Because you could just see sort of like, on a strapless dress, you could see like the upper inch of the front bodice, and you know, it was like so tempting. You wanted to go a little deeper in, so like I kept wanting more, but I mean, they really did give you a full 360 view of each gown. So I have a quote I'm going to read you, ladies, and then you're going to give me your reaction. Okay, you ready? So this was a quote that was on the wall when you go into the dress or gown portion of the exhibit. That Charles James was, quote, one of only a handful of 20th century couturiers whose pieces withstand deep analytical scrutiny. To dissect a James gown is to reveal more fully the complete originality and virtuosity of its maker.
Wow. That's a long quote.
Yeah, and you know, it does sort of speak to how strongly people feel about his work, and that he was really like an artist and a sculptor. People talk about him being like an artist, a sculptor, an architect, like they talk about him in these grand terms. And I think it also speaks to how they were trying to put together the exhibit, which, let's talk about the videos a little bit. So tell one of you tell me about your impression of the videos.
Well, I did the downstairs first because I thought that was the only part of the exhibit. And I think it was a little more video heavy in that aspect, and it did a really good job of sort of showing you the pieces within each garment. So it would kind of like, it almost broke it down into the pattern layout you see when you get a commercial pattern, which I thought was really cool.
Very cool.
So I liked that aspect of it. I thought they did a good job. Upstairs, once I got there, I thought it wasn't as necessary. There were a couple gowns I thought they did a really good job, but some of it was a little extraneous.
Right. So so tell the viewers at home that what the videos were, at least on the gowns. Let's talk about it in terms of the gowns. Because each gown had sort of at the foot of the pedestal a screen that showed this video. And some of it was animated video, which was really cool, which would like show the pieces of the dress kind of like flying apart, then coming back on, and like I loved that.
Yeah.
I could have watched that
You
all
could see
day.
all the seam lines, and you even heard a few people kind of gasp as they saw how this piece just suddenly flattened out, and there were all these bizarre angles.
I was one of those
Yeah.
people.
Because he really doesn't use traditional seam lines or
Yeah.
architecture at all. So he had like these bisecting lines, and as it flattened out, you'd have almost like a bizarre conch shape with a jutting angle.
Yes.
And then as it kind of flew apart, you had like these older ladies going, oh.
There was a woman next to me who was like, how did he ever think of that? I was like, exactly. Yeah, because you look at like the Clover gown, which is his most famous, and my favorite of his gowns, and probably his most famous, which is the like ivory satin with the sort of undulating black velvet at the bottom. And you look at it and you think, okay, that's a very beautiful strapless bodice. But when the pieces came apart, I was shocked to see that there's a seam that starts at a dart and goes here and juts around the bodice. And then another seam that starts here and curves that way. So the pieces came apart and they don't look anything like a strapless bodice pattern piece that we would sew with or think of. So it was very interesting to see, and it was a little like, why did he do it?
He
so
wasn't
much
traditionally trained, though, right? So that might be why they ended up that way.
And there was a quote from him well, you keep saying downstairs and upstairs, and I think of downstairs as being all the personal effects, but apparently
Yes,
that's upstairs.
that's downstairs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So downstairs there was a quote from him saying that he could work for 12 hours on a seam without eating or I don't know, something. It was very dramatic,
very
but like,
dramatic.
yeah.
I get that impression from him, that he was very...
Yes, he was very much an
extreme.
eccentric, very sort of strange man, and definitely very self-aggrandizing. So there was this quote that, I work for 12 hours on a seam without eating or drinking, and until it's finally right at the end, and then I can move on. But I did get the sense that, okay, he probably did think about the seams on that bodice for more than 12 hours a piece.
I think so.
Yeah. So what else do we have to talk about? We have the technology. This is what I really wanted to talk about. Because there was an article in the New York Times that talked about, before the exhibit, that said, okay, there's going to be this amazing new technology at this exhibit. Robotic arms that have either digital projectors on them or cameras that will help bring James's work to life.
I wouldn't say it necessarily brought it to life. The gowns being on the pedestal, being able to walk around them, seeing how small they were as well. These
Yeah, they were
women
very
were
small.
tiny.
Yeah, like midget tiny, not just like skinny.
in stature as well. I thought that really brought it to life, being able to be so close to it. I was actually amazed there didn't seem to be any alarm sensors if you leaned over it, usually like they do.
You did get a little close.
I did get a bit close and then forgot myself. I was like, oh no, I'm not actually a curator here. But I feel like what the robotic arms did was help give you focus to specific aspects that if you don't have a trained eye, you might miss and not appreciate quite how much work you put into those outfits.
I thought they did a good job, too, of showing you the interior structure as best they could when you can't touch it and you can't look at it and look at it inside out. They really tried to bring that aspect into the exhibit.
Yeah, it did have that sort of like beeping little light that looks like you look like a sniper or something was like targeting the gowns. But it did show you like okay, we're talking about this seam, and it would sort of point it out on the gown, which was helpful. But then the other thing they did, which was a little weird, was that they pretended like the cameras were currently filming the gowns, which they weren't. It was just sort of like a dummy thing, because
they were pre-recorded.
It was all pre-recorded. So I thought that wasn't really an interesting use of technology at all. And the other interesting thing that the New York Times article said was that they had a costume designer recreate the Clover gown so that they would completely understand how it was made. But then they didn't use the replica.
They didn't show
There
it
wasn't
at
a
all,
replica
actually.
there.
Where's the
Yeah.
replica?
Good point.
I don't know.
We never get to see it. That's a shame, because I would
Yeah.
like to have seen if they were successful
Yeah.
in a good
Maybe they
replica.
weren't, and that's why you didn't see
They were
it.
too embarrassed. They were ashamed by then.
Yeah, so they did go to the trouble of trying to learn so much about the inside that they replicated it, but then Hello. But then they didn't actually show us the result of it. So maybe it was just trying to help the curators understand it more. But it was such a tease. I really wanted to see it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, overall an amazing exhibit.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's so worth seeing. And I would even go back if you ladies want to check it out again. And and the book, they did release a book that's pretty astounding, full photos of his work. And what else?
One other thing, when you first walk in on the left-hand side, on the upstairs exhibition where the ball gowns are, you get to see a number of the muslins
Yes.
in, like, on a dress form, so you get to see almost before they became that final creation in the full room. And I thought that was great. From my perspective, I had kittens over that. I could have just looked at that and then saw a photograph of the dress.
I wish I had gone back to the muslins, though, after I saw all the dresses, which I didn't do.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that's a good point. Like, what are sewers going to get out of this exhibit? I mean, mostly just being baffled by, how someone could spend that amount of time working out seaming and construction is what I came away with. But really appreciating his dedication to construction, because it was all about that for him. So, yeah, I mean, just having a deeper sense of what went into these gowns and being inspired. I mean, I felt inspired. I wanted to go sew a boned
ball gown.
cocktail dress
I want to
with
sew
buckram
myself
in it.
a dolman sleeve coat, like I saw downstairs.
Oh, the mustard yellow gold coloured one.
No, it was like a dark green.
Oh.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, there were a lot of coats and jackets on display, and there was an interesting quote from him saying that he felt like he contributed so much to the world of tailoring. That was his greatest innovation.
Oh.
But the magazines never picked it up. They only focused on his ball gowns, which, I mean, hello, his ball gowns are the more dramatic of the two. But he did have some really spectacular coats.
Yeah, the coats were good.
They were good. so check out the quotes, the coats. But seriously, the ball gowns were really amazing.
Stunning.
Okay, so to wrap up, let's talk about, if you can choose, what was your favorite piece in the whole exhibit?
I'd have to say it was the emerald dress. I don't think it had a proper official name, but it was beautiful emerald, very simple, but with a giant arcing swoosh coming from the front and round at the hem.
Yeah, that sort of like
Stunning.
spiral flounce thing
it
was amazing.
Beautiful. One
Yeah.
giant cone and then round. Yeah,
Yes,
that
very
was my
cool.
favourite.
Good choice.
was beautiful.
Good choice.
I
Allison?
think I liked the swan gown best. And I think that was one of the examples of that dummy camera that wasn't really a camera. But it showed you all the layers of tulle underneath, and there was this bright, bright purple that was mixed in with like cream and brown, and it made the most beautiful like fawn kind of pinkish brown color on the outside. It was gorgeous.
Yeah, the layers of tulle on that, there were like 5 different colors, and they just gave the most amazing effect. So I have to be boring and say the clover gown, which is like his most famous dress, and it was my favorite before I saw it on exhibit. But it really is just, it amazes me every time, just that detail at the bottom. And then getting to see through the animated video how much more interesting than I even knew it was with the seaming on the bodice was just amazing to see. And they also had a second version of the clover gown that was lace applique, and it was sort of like a tan and then like a burnt ochre color at the bottom or something with like that lace applique all over it, and it was gorgeous, and it was totally made the dress look totally new to me. So I gotta go with the clover.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you ladies so much for being here. This was really fun. And thank you all for watching this episode of Gertie's Sewing Show, and I hope to see you again soon.